Welcome back to You're All Doomed, a podcast that is smashing its way through Jason X 13 minutes at a time. I am vaccine advocate Greg.
And I'm Brian.
And this segment begins with the runaway Grendel approaching the space station Solaris and ends with a shot of Jason standing in the corridor.
With Lou dead, nobody's piloting the Grendel, so the Solaris radios to the ship, "Pull up! Abort docking! You're coming in too fast!" Which is something that my wife often says to me. Professor Lowe is down in Lab 1, and he tells the students to brace for impact. The Grendel at first grazes a large, glass dome of the Solaris. Then it crashes through a tall building because apparently Solaris is just like a floating metropolis in outer space.
Yeah, was that like the greenhouse or something? What was that dome supposed to be?
It doesn't seem like a very logical piece of equipment to have out in outer space.
And very fragile for, like if there's space junk or a meteorite or something, it would just smash right through that fucking thing.
But despite all the collisions and explosions, the Grendel seems pretty much unharmed and continues on its merry way, leaving the mostly destroyed Solaris behind them. Lowe tells everyone that they just overshot the Solaris and that they'll just turn around and go back. But they watch as the Solaris explodes and is completely destroyed, which I kind of liked. Yeah,
I liked that. And I thought it was kind of funny that as he's saying they can just turn around, you're watching the thing explode on the view screen behind him. So it was kind of a humorous moment. So I have a question here, a philosophical question here for you. It was similar to something that came up in Jason Goes to Hell when four random high school graduates were apparently trapped and killed in a fire that took place in the ship's restaurant. And we discussed whether or not we should count those as Jason kills, and you voted no because it was more like collateral damage. And I see that point, but here I feel like any deaths aboard this space station, while not what Jason intended, happened directly as a result of him killing the pilot of the Grendel. So I'd sort of think we should count these towards Jason's tally.
But couldn't you also blame the architect of the Solaris for building a glass dome in outer space?
Yeah, sure. Yes. There were poor design choices and engineering choices made at the construction of this space station, but they, presumably it's been around for a while already with no trouble and would not have exploded if Jason hadn't come calling.
If you can come up with a number of inhabitants of Solaris that is accurate enough, I'd be willing to count it. But, we know that there's at least 60. Well, right. We know there's at least 61 because Professor Lowe said that there was 60 armed personnel on the Solaris that was going to help them get off the ship and protect them from Jason. And then we know that he was also talking to that Dieter dude,
right,
who was on Solaris. So we know there's at least 61 casualties. But from the size of this space metropolis, there's probably thousands of others.
Yeah, true. We would be purely speculating about a number beyond the 61. But, potentially, yeah, we're looking at an enormous number of people because of the size of those, structures and stuff. So this could really, rocket Jason's numbers way into the stratosphere. Dieter Perez was played by Robert A. Silverman, who looked really, really familiar to me. But I don't know that I've necessarily seen any of the stuff on his IMDb profile. He's a Cronenberg veteran, so maybe that's where I'm recognizing him from. And he was on a couple of episodes of Friday the 13th, the series, but I didn't watch that. He seems like one of those dudes who's been around, but I can't really peg where I would know him from. After they witness the destruction of the space station, there's some pounding on the door of Lab 1, which freaks everyone out. It suddenly goes quiet. Rowan creeps forward for a closer look, or maybe she's going to put her ear against the door. So there's a drawn-out, listening for more noise sequence, and we get a really good look at the actress Lexa Doig's smallpox vaccination scar. Interestingly, routine vaccination for smallpox stopped in the U.S. in 1972, and Lexadoig was born in Canada in 1973. So Canada must have been on a little bit of a different schedule with their smallpox vaccination program. The disease was declared eradicated in 1980 thanks to a concerted effort to vaccinate everyone, only to see new threats arise in the new millennium, both as a potential bioweapon and because of the anti-vaccination movements that have sprung up in recent years.
There's a funny moment while Rowan has her head kind of up against the door to hear what's going on. Janessa leans in and goes, "Why don't you just stick your head out and have a peek?"
Yeah, that seemed sort of perhaps a joke that was spawned because of the self-referential approach that Scream took a few years earlier.
But as everyone's attention is focused on the metal door that the pounding was just happening on, Jason comes smashing through a large glass panel behind Professor Lowe. Everyone goes running out of the lab and into some sort of like storage room down the hall. KM is able to secure the room by locking some doors behind them. But once they're in the room, they realize that Professor Lowe isn't with them.
No, he's cowering back in Lab 1 against a computer console and actually tries to engage Jason in conversation. Not very interested in forming a personal bond here. Jason reaches past the professor to pick up his original machete and ditching the bone saw that he'd been using. The professor is relieved and calls down the corridor to the group, "It's okay, everybody. He just wants his machete back." My wife happened to be walking past as that line got spoken, and she actually laughed out loud. She thought that was pretty funny.
I love it. Yeah, it's a great delivery. It's just very, optimistic. And he's just like, I think there's even like a sigh of relief at the end where he's like, whew. Like, he's just like, "It's okay, guys. He just wants his machete back." And it's just, no one in their right minds actually believes that that's true, but he's convinced like he has resolved this problem with Jason.
Disappointingly, we don't see what happens to him. We hear from the group's vantage point down the hall. We hear the professor's wail of agony, so presumably he's killed, as you would expect. He was played by Jonathan Potts, who played the voice of Link in the Legend of Zelda cartoon and Captain N the Game Master. He also played Dean in the Jesse Ventura story, but I don't know if Dean is a name or if he was like the dean at a college where Jesse Ventura went to school. Jonathan Potts also appeared on Queer as Folk and acted in Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium. He's still working, so you might see him pop up here and there.
After Professor Lowe's screams die down, there's an amusing moment where Rowan asks Waylander if they're able to beam themselves off the ship. And Waylander is like, "No, we can't beam ourselves off the ship." So I love that, she's trying to utilize her limited knowledge of, future space flight and applying it to this actual scenario, and them just looking at her like she's crazy.
Mm-hmm. They do take a surprisingly long time to remember that they have a shuttle they can use to escape in. And as they begin to make their way toward that, they stumble upon one of the dead grunts from earlier. And Rowan leans down and picks up one of the pulse rifles or BFGs that they were carrying.
I think it's Gecko's body, but I'm not 100% certain. It was kind of hard to tell.
There's an annoying moment of future acknowledging dialogue. There are a couple of examples of this in this segment. They ask Rowan if she knows how to use this thing, and she says, "It's just like riding a bike." And Janessa says, "What's a bike?" Durr.
Speaking of eye-rolling space scenes, there's a moment where KM tells Suneron that their chances of survival are 12%, and Suneron wonders if there's a way to increase those odds. So he starts making out with her, and there's this nasty string of spit as they pull away from their first kiss that I noticed, thanks to the flawless, Scream Factory Blu-ray that I have. But after the kiss, KM says that their odds of survival have now somehow increased to 53%, and then Suneron wonders out loud if she wants to go for 100%. Ew.
Yeah, yikes. I mean, I kind of like the little subplot that's going on here with KM wanting to be a real woman, and clearly has an emotional attachment to Sooneron. And so this is kind of a cute little moment where, you know, odds aren't looking good, but then he kind of inspires her protective spirit by reciprocating her affection. But they take it a little too far, and it gets a little creepy when they discuss going for the full 100.
So while KM and Sooneron are messing around, it appears that Rowan, Kinza, and Janessa are down in the same room where Jason laid waste to all the grunts earlier. Kinza is freaking out, and Rowan says that if she makes another sound, she'll snap her neck herself. Settle down there, scientist girl. And then Rowan thinks she sees someone still alive in the shadows, so she tells Janessa and Kinza to head to the shuttle while she investigates.
Meanwhile, Crutch and Waylander get to the bridge of the ship, where they find the completely hacked apart remains of Big Lou, the pilot. I'm not even really sure what I'm looking at, beyond an arm and one hand that I can discern from this carnage. But it was spread all over the place, and almost seemed like something out of Hellraiser.
Yeah, it's a total mess in there, and there's not really a lot of logic to what we're seeing, but I would have liked to have seen Jason unleash in that, you know, in those small quarters on Lou, because he obviously had to take many swipes to chop him up into that many pieces, but whatever we got was just like a quick slice and then a cutaway, so it's a little bit of a shame.
Yeah, it would have been like Fruit Ninja or something. He would have been, you know... In another example of lame, you know, future references, Waylander is shocked at the carnage, but Crutch says this pales in comparison to the Microsoft conflict. Badert.
Even says that they were beating each other with their own severed limbs, which I don't know how Crutch can really claim that, because he has all of his limbs intact.
He used other people's limbs. He's that kind of guy.
Yeah, or I guess you could suppose that they also use the nanobite technology to replace any limbs that he may have lost in the Microsoft conflict.
Good point.
It seemed like big words for someone who still had all of his limbs.
Back down in the cargo bay, Rowan finds that the person she spotted hiding over in the corner is Brodsky. He's pretty banged up, but he's still alive. She hangs back to see if she can help, you know, get him moved, but she's going to need a hand because he's such a big dude. Waylander picks up the transmission and goes to help her, but by the time he gets there, Brodsky has disappeared.
Back up in the bridge, Crutch is punching some buttons on the control panel when he hears something behind him, and we see Lowe's head peek around from behind the chair. And Crutch breathes a sigh of relief, only it's not Lowe. Exactly. It's Jason holding Lowe's decapitated head. It's
a great moment, at least conceptually, although I'm not sure. It's really weird. I'm not sure what Jason's going for here.
I don't know either. I mean, why would he be walking around carrying Lowe's head?
And we know that he likes to stage bodies to scare people for them to stumble upon, you know, picking up from his mother's habit of hanging people in trees that flop down conveniently. But this is almost like him using the head as a puppet. And it's almost like it's kind of humorous on Jason's part. Like, and that just, it was a weird moment. I liked it. I'm not sure it fits.
No, for me, it would have made more sense if it was Lou's head, which would have still been in the cockpit. And Jason just entered the cockpit, saw Lou's head sitting on the ground, and was like, oh, well, I'm just going to pick this up. It doesn't make as much sense, but at least the head is already there, and it doesn't require Jason to be walking around the corridors inexplicably carrying Lou's head in his hand.
Right.
But before Crutch can respond, Jason grabs Crutch by the head and pulls him out of the chair and repeatedly slams his head into an electrical panel. So R.I.P. Crutch.
Yeah, I can't tell whether he dies from the blunt force trauma or electrocution from the panel, but either way, he's dead. He was played by Philip Williams, who did the voice of the X-Men character Banshee in the popular 90s animated series. He was also the head custodian in Good Will Hunting, and apparently also appeared in season 2 of Fargo. He still works a lot, so he's another person that might pop up here and there.
I thought Matt Damon was the head custodian in Good Will Hunting. I also saw that he was a sharpshooter in the Santa Claus. That movie's way darker than I remembered.
Yeah, Jesus.
He was also in an episode of Transporter, the series, but as far as I'm concerned, if it doesn't star Jason Statham, fuck you, Transporter, the series.
Amen. I find the whole shuttle launch sequence needlessly complicated. They really should just be able to pile in, shut the door, and take off, but there's all sorts of computations that have to happen and fuel lines to detach and all that stuff. So that causes some problems when scaredy girl Kinsa locks herself in the shuttle because she panics, leaving everyone behind, and actually launches, even though the shuttle is still connected to the main ship. This causes the shuttle to smash against the hull and explode. So with one stupid move, she has not only killed herself, but doomed her poor friends. Kinsa was played by Melody Johnson, who appeared in Goosebumps, as well as The Virgin Suicides and A Simple Favor. Interestingly, she does not include Jason X on her acting resume.
I noticed that on the control panel during the lockdown sequence, it says Beowulf on it, which is another reference to Grendel. But they spelled Beowulf wrong. They spelled it W-O-L-F instead of W-U-L-F.
It's bad when you can't even get your literary pretensions spelled correctly.
Thanks to Kinza's poor flying skills, the explosion on the Grendel throws Janessa, Waylander, and Rowan to the ground. And as they slowly pick themselves back up, our old friend Jason walks into the room. And that's where this segment ends.
We have 3 confirmed kills in this episode, along with whoever happened to be aboard the space station. We know for sure that it's at least the 60 elite troopers, and we presume that that Dieter Perez was on board, although he may have gone off on another mission somewhere or something. But let's just call it 3 for now.
For more talk about nippleless boobs, tune in next week to another episode of You're All Doomed.